Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello and welcome. It is the GSMC Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am one of two, and Brice is two of two, because we are the dynamic duo of the podcasting network for sports. I think we're the only sports duo around as far as GSMC goes, so we'll hold on to that title until that changes. But for now, it's just me and Brice here, you know, every Tuesday. How are you doing, man? How is life treating you?
It's good, man. You know, just been out here making it through every day, man. Just trying to get through every day and just trying to be a better man than I was yesterday, like I always say. Yes, sir. Right. But you know, man, how are you, man? How have you been?
I've been good. You know, been taking some more photos. Been working on my photography recent time. I'm gonna plan to do more, you know, going out and doing more fun stuff like that to, you know, keep myself occupied. As you know, quarantine has been kind of on pause for a lot of the nation. And, you know, I'm still trying to stay safe out here, but I might have to step outside a little bit and go downtown, shoot some photos, do some, you know, landscape photography or just some, you know, street work, things like that. But what we're here to talk about today is not that. We're talking about some football, NFL, some college stuff. We haven't talked about college in a long time, but we're going to get into that as well. But first on the list of today is the NFL gears up for players to return to team facilities, and Commissioner Roger Goodell issued protocols to clubs detailed in a Monday memo from last Monday obtained by NFL Network's Tom Pelissero. So the protocol for players return to club facilities are broken down to access, physical distancing, facility and equipment cleaning and disinfected, food service, personal protective equipment and hygiene, compliance with protocols and education on the spread and prevention of infection. So Pelissero reported that while no dates have been set yet and no mini camps are expected, the NFL and the NFL Players Association are discussing the possibility of certain players, such as rookies and veterans, who change teams and need physicals, returning to the club facilities on a limited basis before June 26th. And the protocols for return include, of course, cleaning, protective, and other guidelines to ensure the safeties of players returning. Each team is required to certify they've met the guidelines and submit a copy of their infectious disease plan. So all players and staff must wear masks at all times in the facility unless a mask cannot be worn due to interference with the performance of athletic activities. So there's a little tidbit there that we can tug on. Surgical masks must be replaced daily or more frequently if visibly soiled. Cloth masks must be laundered daily, or staff and players must be provided with a sufficient supply of cloth masks, as they may rotate masks every 3 days, and teams are responsible for obtaining any adequate supply of surgical and cloth masks for players. So there's a lot more lists and things going down the line, such as helmets, shoulder pads, and other equipment must be disinfected after each practice or game. Every individual entering the facility must clean and disinfect his or her cell phones, keys, and other frequently touched objects being carried. So it looks like the NFL and probably every other major sporting franchise is going to be doing similar things like this, where you are disinfecting every single thing you walk in with and walk out with, and nothing is going to get past them, hopefully, as far as that this is probably the most surefire way. But at the end of the day, you never know what people do when they, get home. So, what do you think about so far how rigorous the NFL is making this sound like it's going to be on players?
Well, I mean, they're just trying to do what they have to do to protect the players. Obviously, that's the most important thing you want to do. And that's why when you listed everything that happened, it came off very detailed. It came off another, guideline after another guideline. And, I feel like, the NFL is just, like I said, trying to do what they kind of do to limit exposure, but also protect everybody who will be at these facilities, obviously for camps or training camp or for the season and everything like that. Like I said, last thing they want is, active players getting COVID, and then, that happens and you could be obviously I always like to say every player is important, but especially if like a star player got it, it's like, oh, star player got it. Oh, we don't know who we've been in contact with. And you know how that can go when it comes to COVID-19. And so it just makes sense that the NFL is doing what they're doing right now to create an atmosphere and to create the rules the way they are to make sure they can try to get every loose end they can potentially get. So then it wouldn't get out of hand, or they can keep it contained and diagnose it quickly. Because that's really the main thing that you would want to do with this as well, is that you want to make sure that, okay, if something happened and one person got it, at least you still have protocols in place to try to ensure that other people don't get it. And that's one of the most important things they're trying to accomplish with the guidelines that they're having. And that's why this probably adds on to why this season will probably be extremely different for every player who's in it, who's going to be in these locker rooms, going through all this different stuff, having to everything disinfected, have to wear masks all the time. I mean, think about it. You never thought about being maybe on a practice field or being in a locker room and you have to wear a mask. Like, you just never think about that. So obviously that's going to be very interesting to kind of see what happens from there.
Yeah, and it's going to be, I wonder how much mask usage is going to be done on the field, because I would imagine that people who have, certain tendencies of, like mouthpieces or things like that. Some people like their mouthpiece to not be off their face mask. Some people like to, you can't have a mouthpiece and have a face mask on and not have some sort of breathing issue at some point. I would feel it might feel a little bit unnatural. But at the same time, I'm sure the NFL, people find ways to make stuff popular and stuff cool, right? So let's say, like, I don't know, Richard Sherman, he has masks before or things like that, where especially if it's cold, he'll put something over his face to cover, from the wind chill and all that stuff. I can imagine just how many players are going to start swagging out their protective mask and there's things like that and branding them in order to, to elevate their status, their social status. I think they'll find a way to make it fun for them, because this process does sound very rigorous, and I'm sure we didn't even talk about it, but there's probably going to be weekly testing. And from my understanding of how the test is, it is horrible. Like they stick like these super long, pipe cleaners up your nose in both nostrils and rotate them 360 degrees. And it's not pleasant. It makes eyes water and such. So I would not be looking forward to this if I was an NFL player. But of course, they make a lot of money. So maybe they'll suck it up for a little while. They play a painful game anyway. What's a little bit more pain on that end?
That's true. But, also, if I may add, because this news kind of just dropped, and I don't know, if you want to break it down maybe later in the show more, but the NCAA, obviously, since we're on football, improved their preseason plan to go ahead and improve a 6-week preseason plan that will allow practices by mid-July. So obviously that's a big step forward towards the college football season returning, and probably starting on time, at least for college football fans and everybody who loves college football.
Yeah, we will get a little bit farther into this, of course, near the tail end, because although it seems like college football is chugging along, you do have to remember that this is kind of state by state basis. The thing about the NFL is that the NFL is ran by a private corporation. They don't have to follow the rules of the state of Illinois. They don't have to follow the rules of the state of Georgia, and so on and so forth. If they want to come back, they can come back. Of course, they're working with them, but they don't have to. They don't directly answer to them. Colleges and universities answer directly to state officials. They have rules that they have to go through and hurdles to go through, and each state is at different lengths of reopening than others. So it's very possible that there might be issues with getting all 130, FBS schools to participate. But we're going to take our first break here, and coming out, we're going to be talking about a team near and dear to our good friend Brice's heart.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, we're back here at the GSMC, and Brice, the floor is going to be yours in a few minutes here, but just to paint the picture for what we're talking about, it is about the Atlanta Falcons. You are a Falcons supporter by blood, nature, tears, pain, maybe joy. I don't know. Do you guys experience joy? Is that a thing?
I mean, yeah. I don't think a true fan would definitely feel that.
Listen, it's been a long time since I felt joy, so this is not me throwing a slight at you. I feel equal amounts of pain on all sides. But of course, earlier last week, Matt Ryan was talking about Todd Gurley being on the Atlanta Falcons. He told ESPN that he and Gurley have worked out in Southern California along with other Falcons vets and newcomers in recent weeks, and that he is already taken with the two-time All-Pro running back, and he's gotten to work with Todd, and he's awesome, accordingly to him. He's a really, really good guy, hard worker. He's super smart. The stuff that I was telling him one day, the next day, he had it done, and he was really impressed with the ability to retain information. You don't have to tell him twice. He's on it. So Todd Gurley, of course, in his MVP form, is the best running back in football, and at a certain aspect, it was not even close. And of course, now, we see a lot of running backs who could potentially take that title away. It's Christian McCaffrey's, the Saquons, all that in the bag of chips. But we do need to talk about the Falcons as a whole, offensively, defensively, and look at their potential this upcoming season. So, Brice, we all know how the Falcons started last year. It was pretty abysmal, to say the least. It was bleak. It did not have a lot of direction. And as per fashion, people were looking for some coach firings. And it really felt like it was one more week to go before Thomas Dimitroff and, of course, Arthur Blank, the guy who writes his checks, was going to just let it go. But he persevered. And, of course, the brotherhood stood strong, and the players really came through for their coach. But when you look at Dan Quinn today, what is the first thought that comes into your mind? Objectively, subjectively, answer however you would like to.
Listen, I think, as a team, we have been through the same cycle. 2 years ago, we started out, I want to say 4-4, and then we lost, I want to say 4 straight. Then we won 5 out like 5 out of the last 6 to finish 7-9. Wait, actually, no, it'll be 3 out of the last 4 to finish 7-9. And then last year, obviously, like you said, was abysmal. Ended the season well. Dan Quinn was able to keep his job. I mean, for me, first things first, obviously, is we can't start slow again. If you have seen the Falcons schedule, especially on the back end of the schedule, it's very brutal. We play Tampa twice, we play the Saints twice, and we play Kansas City. So we have to take advantage of the first part of the schedule, where our schedule still isn't the easiest in the world. We have a top five tough schedule, according to a lot of, NFL.com and et cetera. But we have to start off and be able to win those competitive games at first. I mean, we start off week 1 against Seattle, and Russell Wilson, somebody who some people think is a Super Bowl favorite out of the NFC. So obviously that's going to be a big game for us to make a statement. From a team perspective and a roster perspective, I think the Falcons are one of those teams. It's like I feel like this like with the Saints. When you're a talented team and you have talent in almost every position, you don't really have a lot of quote unquote holes on your team, if that makes sense. But like there's positions you could upgrade. There's positions that could improve. There's positions that could have more competition. And obviously with teams that have a lot of good players, more money is paid. So cap isn't as much available. And so we do what we can, what we have. Now, obviously this offseason, as you said, we added Todd Gurley. We added Dante Fowler. We drafted Marlon Davidson. We drafted AJ Terrell. I mean, we made a couple additions. We drafted a guy who we expect to play on the offensive line. Obviously, we added, like I said, Todd Gurley. And we also added someone that nobody talks about, Levon Treadwell. I think that would be a very interesting free agency signing to see what he does. Obviously, after a so far failed stint with Minnesota when he was drafted by them. So and we still have obviously Matt. We still have Julio. We still have, Calvin Ridley. We traded for Adam Hurst. We lost Austin Hooper. We still got Matthews, and everything like that. So overall, when you look at the team on paper, it's not the worst team look put together. I mean, we have a talented team. We can compete with the top teams in the NFC. I mean, we beat the 49ers last year, and obviously one of probably the best games of the year. Obviously the second, but one of the best games of the year, in my opinion. So we have the ability. We just need more consistency. We're very inconsistent. We have to be more consistent with our play. And we have to get consistent coaching, because I do feel like coaching has not been consistent sometimes. That's why, because I noticed last year, Dan Quinn coached the defense. Defense was hot garbage. Then he gives the duties to someone else. Now they play like they're actually halfway decent.
Why is that? That's always been something about Dan Quinn since he's been there. I've noticed that if he gives the defense away, it's not going well, or they're not picking up the schemes. Like I remember was it the year after the Super Bowl, or literally the Super Bowl year when they didn't win?
The Super Bowl year, Dan Quinn took over late with play calling, and then our defense played better going into the Super Bowl.
But didn't you guys fire your defensive coordinator at the time?
After the season, yes, we did.
Yeah, so you guys fired him, and Dan Quinn decided to take over the defense at that point. And then,
no, that wasn't that year. It was, we actually gave it to someone else. The year you're talking about was this previous year. Okay. We had fired our defensive coordinator, and he took over the defense to start this past season, right, as defensive coordinator.
There's been a lot of defensive coordinator issues with the Falcons, and it's it does show in their play. It can be kind of inconsistent. The year that they won the Super Bowl, their defense wasn't the greatest.
Rankings wise, we were 32nd, but like when he took over, we played much better. Right. It's just by that point, it's statistics. That's what you're going to be looked at as.
Right. But I mean, the team was very young, so everyone thought that, oh man, this team is going to be the new Seattle essentially as far as defensively. They're fast, they're physical, and if they learn well, they'll be able to do it. You got the pass rusher, or you thought you had your pass rusher, you had your Grady Jarrett, you had your corner that you thought you could trust in Desmond Trufant, right? He didn't pan out too well, and of course
he actually got hurt that year. A lot of people forget that he actually got hurt in the middle of the year that year.
Yeah,
so our starting corners were like Jalen Collins, if you remember him.
He was never this bad. Yeah, no, Jalen Collins, he kept doing PEDs and got kicked out of the league. But I remember, Robert Alford. He was young and athletic, but had no ball skills. So a lot of PIs. And he's very similar to Eli Apple in all honesty.
Oh boy.
But the Falcons recently, the only thing is, like, you look at their team and you think about the Super Bowl run, because that's the main thing people talk about with the Falcons these days is, like, how do you get back to where you were? And I think a lot of people do forget that their Super Bowl run was completely based off of their offensive efficiency and being able to score in the red zone at will. They ran the
We had a
football.
dominant offense that year.
Very balanced offensive attack. Their run game was legit. Their passing game was lights out. And they didn't force their defense into bad plays all the time. And they weren't like they were playing from behind very much. So the Falcons, of course, need to do what everybody else does in the NFL if they want to win. Not play from behind. You know, give your defense some chances here. And it's not to say that Matt Ryan is a turnover machine or anything like that, but there are times where the offense does stall. There are times where they can't get the ball down the field. And their running game, honestly, for lack of a better term, has been kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. Remember, we were just about the defensive side of the ball, offensive side of the ball.
Right.
Kyle Shanahan first.
Wait. You want to continue this conversation?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, we gotta get a quick break in, but coming back out of the break, we're going to continue on this Falcons trend.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, Brice, we're out of the break now. Let's continue. Go ahead. Finish the thought.
Oh, so what I was going to say was, I mean, we were talking about the defense. Don't forget about the offensive inconsistencies we've had. Remember, the first year under Kyle Shanahan was not great. That was the year I think Ryan threw double-digit interceptions, and everybody would say he's done, he's washed up, get him out of there, before he had his MVP year the next year. And then remember, what was his name? Steve Sarkisian. Remember, he was offensive coordinator, and then in the first year, just like, I'm not feeling the play call. And that was really, in the second year, it wasn't even that bad. Ryan had, I think, 35 touchdowns and 7 interceptions that second year under Steve Sarkisian, but the offense still never felt the same. And so it feels like there's been an inconsistency offensively as well. So it just feels like on both sides of the ball, either defense or offense, both are never clicking at the same time. One's either not consistent and the other one is, or just it's vice versa. Like, remember, the year after the Super Bowl, we went 10-6. Our offense was very inconsistent, but our defense was the top 10 defense that year. And that's what got us to 10-6, which you would think our strength should be offense because of all the weapons we had. So, like I said, that's why I say it's important for us to be consistent, because if we're not consistent, it's not going to happen for us. I mean, every team has to be consistent to win in this league. And you clearly see with the Falcons, you have to be consistent, or else something is going to go awry. And we don't want that. The city of Atlanta doesn't want that. And I think, listen, pressure's on Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn's last stand. If he comes out the gates 0-5, he's out of here. I mean, there's just no logical way on.
What about 0-3? Like, I don't think.
Probably. I think after we'll give him that fourth game. You never know. Maybe he can start a 6-game winning streak or something. But if he gets 0-4, yeah, he's about 4 games before we hit 500 for the season. Yeah, I'm about to get him out of here.
I do think it will be nuanced, though. It can't just be, you lost 4 in a row, or you're like 1-3 and he's out of there. I do think that it depends on how the losses come. If they're not competitive, if it looks like the offense is still stalling out, the defense doesn't know what's going on, I think he's done. But if it's competitive through and through and it's just a bunch of tough losses, I think they'll be more inclined to give him more time to get this ship right, because, winning is hard, but it's all about, winning is a lot of more about execution and discipline rather than just flat out being worse than somebody else. It's the little things. Speaking of the little things, let's talk about one of the more interesting depth positions you guys have in wide receivers, because I've always been interested in the Falcons wide receiver game. I always thought they are the scariest team that never comes together when it comes to wide receivers. And I don't know why that is, but ever since you guys drafted Calvin Ridley, I have been worried about the next Falcons burst. And it hasn't come just yet, but I know it's possible. But time is ticking. The clock is coming for Julio in the game. And you never really know when somebody's potential window is done until it's over. And maybe their window has passed. Some people think it has. Some people think that their window is as open as, their offensive consistency can take them. But their team is, without a doubt, talented across the board on the offensive side of the ball. They got Jaden Hurst. They have Calvin Ridley, who honestly, at this point, in my opinion, if he doesn't take the next step, what do you do with him? Do you continue to keep him on the roster, or do you see him as somebody who, even though he was scouted coming out of the draft as a potential, number one guy as far as a receiver, being your number one option, it really hasn't panned out. And maybe that's a little bit because of the Julio effect. But at the same time, if Julio's taking so much off of everybody else, you would expect Calvin Ridley to be at a different level at this point in his career, don't you think?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Obviously, both his rookie year and his second year were very similar, except his rookie year he just scored more touchdowns. But his second year he got more yards. For number two, he's putting up good number two numbers, and obviously he needs to, keep that up. Obviously, with Julio being the number one, I think, you pretty much know at the end of the day who Matt is going to when it comes to clutch throws. But Calvin can definitely create some things for himself and do some damage to defenses when given the opportunity, because he is someone that has, gained the respect, I feel, of a lot of secondaries in the league. And that's why, people do consider that duo of Julio and Calvin one of the better ones. One of the questions to me, obviously, is with Julio getting older, obviously, they'll have to make that decision. Let's be honest. If Calvin continues on this, getting close around 10 touchdowns a year, he's getting about 60 catches, about, I believe, 600 to 700 yards, maybe I think 800 last year. We're going to have to make a decision. Okay, someone could see that and say, we're going to pay Calvin Ridley big money to be our star wide receiver. If Julio is still around, he'll be older, but are we willing to then give out that type of money to Calvin to take over for Julio? This is kind of like the Roddy White situation when Julio was drafted at the end of Roddy White's career. It was kind of like, okay, he's getting older. You have Julio, who looks like he'll be the new number one. Now, luckily, Roddy White retired before that happened, so obviously that didn't have to become an issue. Julio might be still playing when that happens. Now, I feel like they would play out the rest of Calvin's deal because he's only been in the league for 2 years, and I think they'll pick up his fifth-year option. So maybe we don't know where Julio will be in 3 years. He might retire. We don't know. He might retire. But if he does stick around, I don't think it'll be as big of an issue as long as Calvin really continues to stay at the pace that he's on and then makes those jumps. Because you never know, if Julio goes down, that might be his time to really show us, okay, do we want to pay him to be our future number one, or is he a guy that we may just let him play out his rookie deal and let him walk when it's over?
Well, I feel like in this current climate of wide receivers and running backs even, there's not a lot of guys who come into their third and fourth years that end up being more than what they are. It's very rare at this point. If you weren't somebody who showed the flashes of greatness early on, it's very hard to become that. Like, you can always be solid, right? You can always be a solid 2 or 3, a slot guy. But to be a legit number one, you have to make that known from the very beginning. And that's what Julio did in his younger days. People knew Julio was going to be a problem. We don't know for sure Calvin Ridley is going to be a problem enough to where he can handle being the number one on the outside. And I think a lot of that is going to determine a lot, because when you look at Julio's career arc, Some people might say he looks more like the Larry Fitz, but to be honest, Larry Fitz longevity in this league is something that you don't really see very often. And we have to remember Julio Jones is not like foreign to injury. You know, his feet are bad. His ankles aren't always the best. He gets banged up a lot. And eventually that's going to catch up with him. And I already feel like Julio has lost a half step as far as his speed, but you know, his quickness, his route running, and his, you know, physicality, his size have helped him continue to be at this elite level to where he's still a top 3 player at the position. But it is going to slow down. It's not like the whole MJ thing where I'm beating people with my mind now. Like, football is hard to beat people with your mind at a certain level, because once the speed goes and the quickness goes, it's hard, man. It's hard to compete. And if you can't get separation as a wide receiver, it's really, really tough to move the ball down the field, because the NFL is just at a different level when it comes to pressure and coverages and things like that. So this isn't more about Calvin Ridley than more so are you going to be prepared for when, you know, Julio is not what we know Julio to be? And are the Falcons prepared for that? Because I don't know if the Falcons have prepped really for that. A lot of wide receiver talent from the Falcons that have been useful to other teams, of course, they left. Like, the Falcons have not retained the best wide receiver core at times. They've had great weapons, but they don't usually retain the better prospects. Like we saw, they let go of Tevin Coleman, and arguably they may have paid the wrong guy. Or, of course, you know, we did see they just traded their best tight end that they've had since Tony Gonzalez. And maybe it was a little bit more of a force feeding rather than actual pure skill. But you guys did trade for him and got some stuff back. So we'll have to see how that affects the overall offensive scheme. But there's not a whole bunch of weapons coming out of the receiver end. And we all know the running backs right now are kind of bleak outside of the fact that you have Todd Gurley. And we don't know what Todd we're getting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll just have to see for the most part, Ethan. They're a team that you go into the season, you're just like, we can be good, but I don't know if we gonna be good. Like it's not like one of those teams where it's like, oh yeah, we're not good enough. Oh yeah, we're not talented enough. Oh yeah, we're assuming losing. It's like we can be one of the best teams in the NFC, but are we going to be? It's kind of like that, Ethan. Are we? Like, it's just like, I don't know. I just got to watch it and find out.
All right. Well, we're going to take another break, and coming out, we're going to be talking about what Roger Goodell said recently this week.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, so back here, GSMC. Guess what, Brice? The NFL is wrong about something. Would you ever consider that? The NFL be wrong about stuff?
With their history, they're wrong about half of things, so I'm not surprised. but what are they wrong about now, Ethan?
Well, the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell, said Friday the league admits it was wrong for not listening to the NFL players earlier and encourages all to speak out peacefully and protest. In a video posted across the league's social media platforms, Roger Goodell's video comes a day after a number of notable NFL players posted identical videos across their social media platforms in which they call on the league to condemn racism and a systematic oppression of black people. admit wrong in silencing our players from peacefully protesting, believe Black Lives Matter. And the 1 minute, 21 second video begins with Roger Goodell offering his condolences to the families of recent victims of police brutality and racial injustice before emphasizing that the NFL stands with its players and condemns the systemic oppression of African Americans. He says that it has been a difficult time for our country, in particular Black people in our country. Roger Goodell said, first, my condolences to the family of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and all the families who have endured police brutality. He continued with, we, the National Football League, condemn racism and systematic oppression of Black people. We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest. We, the National Football League, believe Black Lives Matter. I personally protest with you and want to be a part of a much-needed change in this country. Without Black players, there would be no National Football League, and the protests around the country are emblematic of the centuries of silence, inequality, and oppression of Black players, coaches, fans, and staff. We are listening. I am listening, and I'll be reaching out to players who have raised their voices and others on how we can improve to go forward for a better and more united NFL family. So, of course, this is like a LeBron saying it's about damn time, but at the same time, it does show that it takes a lot for the NFL to sit on something. Let's keep in mind the NFL has contracts with the military. As you know, they have loads and loads of military appreciation things. They do events with the military. They have them out at games for celebration of the military. They are very much pro-military, and they have them all around. So when the kneeling happened and dealing with police brutality, for some reason, well, of course we know why, but it went from the message being about police brutality and injustice among the African American community to about respecting the flag and thus involving the military. And of course, when it starts to affect your dollars, the NFL said we can't side with people who are affecting our dollars and potentially being a distraction. Of course, we hear Roger Goodell saying that they were wrong for this, but we still haven't heard officially from the NFL about how wrong for basically keeping Colin Kaepernick out of the league for the most part. And, you know, we all know about the whole Ravens situation, but I don't really pay attention to that because it sounds like there was more things going on than what is on the surface level. And to be completely honest, at that point, it was already a done deal. And I don't think we'll ever see Colin Kaepernick back in the league. And maybe Eric Reed still may have a chance, but honestly, I don't know if he is because he's getting up there in age as well. And you know how this thing works. You know, they keep you out for so long, and then when it looks like they may want you back, now you don't have the physical ability to really be effective out there on the field. That, you know, therefore, and that much. But it's weird to see the NFL say we were wrong about something when they have so many players doing so many things around the league. Like Demario Davis has been a big advocate about reform when it comes to police brutality and prisons and things like that. And we have other players around the league doing similar things. To hear the NFL say that we were wrong is to admit that they use sort of tactics about some of these players doing this activist type work, social work in their communities, more so as a way of, you know, using that platform for themselves instead of, you know, really being behind the athletes that do them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And, you know, like I said, the NFL knows that they made a mistake. They didn't do what they were supposed to do in this process when Colin Kaepernick started kneeling back at that time. And obviously, as you know, he's blackballed out of the league. And other people who have protested has been affected, obviously, Eric Reed. And so, obviously, we discussed this last week, too, as well, about their stance on things. And the NFL just has to, it's kind of a little bit to me, like it's basically the Drew Brees situation to me, but just bigger because it's not a person, it's a league. So it's a big corporation that has a national image that was against it when that happened. And now with everything that's happening now, they have to now reverse what happened and basically be more proactive with what's going on. Because if they sat here and ignored it or didn't address it or kind of just gave a half effort towards it, then it's just like, well, the Colin thing happened. This is happening. Well, clearly the NFL don't give a flying crap about it. And I'm sure that would probably make even more players outraged. I mean, listen, you still have players today who heard the Roger Goodell statement and thought it was BS. They still don't look at that as anything serious because they're trying to figure out why is it now that you're taking it seriously. You want to help, you want to be active. But when it was peaceful and it was just a national anthem thing, literally however long national anthem is, it was just that maybe minute and a half, 2 minutes. But that was such a big problem for you. But now this happens. Now y'all want to be involved. And I think, obviously with all that, the NFL has to do what they have to do to try to correct the image still. Because obviously their image, especially with the African American community, was affected the most by that situation. And so that's why we are obviously the most outspoken as well when it comes to the situation now. So, the NFL basically, really they just have to do better, man. They just have to, they stay saying stuff. Okay, but now we want to see it. So if players start kneeling when the season starts, are they going to complain? Will owners complain? What will they do? If they're not out here backing it and supporting it, then we're right back where we started with the NFL.
Right, because now you see, for one, everybody else around the country are using the idea of the symbolic nature of kneeling as a gesture of being in solidarity against police brutality. And, if it's wrong or does it seem out of in poor taste because the kneeling led to somebody basically being not able to get a job in his field anymore, being cast out. And now everybody is using it as some sort of corporate gesture or some way to make it look like they are, with the cause. That's another topic for another day. But I can't imagine the NFL going in another season and if people who are probably still going to kneel no matter what happens, the NFL has to be behind their players. And I think the players really showed a lot about their player empowerment when there is no way that they could have been in the wrong for speaking up for injustices. This isn't about getting extra money. This isn't about, selfish gains. This is about the betterment of the country. And there's just no way at this point the NFL was going to be able to fight that because there could have been a real strike. There could have been a lot of things because, Corona is already something. So all it would take is say, oh, Corona and this now? Fine, we're just not going to play. We just will not play. And we'll just watch your league suffer until you figure it out. So, I think the players really do need to be applauded for, being able to speak up and not taking no for an answer on a lot of this stuff that the NFL has seen to kind of be used to for a little while. As when the kneeling first happened, not everybody was on board at first because, they're in the middle of the season. You don't know how that affects the dollars. But this seems a little bit more organized and a lot more people, especially the younger NFL players, feel like their voices need to be heard more. But we're going to take another break, and coming out, we're going to switch gears and talk about some college football.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, GSMC here, me with Brice. And Brice, are you a fan of college football?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely, man. I love it.
I would hope so, because you'd be on the wrong podcast if that was not the case. So, college football is rigorously working its way of coming back, especially the idea of coming back on time. But, they are making contingency plans and plans alike in order to accommodate if it can't come back on time and lateness and things like that. We've heard things from potentially having an early start, so that way when December hits and the potential second wave is more likely, the season is already at a point of ending. And we've also heard that they just want to be able to get to the point where they just start on time with no fans. And even now, recent reports where they see models where they are going to be able to have a decent amount of fans at games. In college football, ADs and coaches and officials and even governing legislator officials want fans in the stands. And maybe that's because, that means more money, more revenue for the universities. As with people in the stands, people get hungry, people want food, people want to buy concessions and t-shirts and things like that. Revenue things. So money is always going to be involved at some point in any of these type of decisions. So, the more fans equal the more money. But there can be some setbacks because, as you know, like we recently just discussed about, you can't just do what you want in college football. College football doesn't even have a actual real commissioner, so to speak. And because it's kind of like the Wild West, they kind of do what they want to do. And the states govern all of these universities at a certain aspects of the matter. So if Tennessee is behind the 8-ball, that means Tennessee, the college, may not be able to participate in practices until later on. And if you have teams like LSU or Alabama who are already starting, voluntary workouts or strength training at this point, you might be really behind the 8-ball and you may not be able to start on time like others. And of course, there's so many different obstacles that college football can face when it comes to testing, when it comes to playing at all. Like, there's no payment for players in college football. So hopefully the money that they've been putting in all these fancy facilities and all this can show itself for once when they have all this round-the-clock testing and things like that. We already saw reports about 5 Alabama players who came to workouts tested positive for coronavirus before they got to the facilities, of course, and they've been all ruled asymptomatic. And that's just as dangerous as, carrying the actual symptoms. But since you're asymptomatic, you never will know if you have it or not. And you don't know when to practice social distancing. So this is another thing that a lot of teams around the country are going to be struggling with. It won't just be Alabama. I know people like to harp on them all the time and saying that football means too much to the state and like it's like a religion. But this is going to happen to everybody. And let's not forget the West Coast is still lagging behind the eastern side of the United States. And it's just because of the mentality. There's just different thought processes on different sides of the U.S., from the East Coast to the Southeast to the West Coast to the Midwest. They all think differently and they all have different plans of when it's time to come back. But they're all working to come back, but we don't know. It's going to be hard for every FBS school to come back. So all that being said, Brice, bring it on me, man. What do you think is probably going to be the right course for FBS schools to come back at let's say the current time that they're supposed to?
I just think, obviously, like I said earlier, they had just passed that ruling on being able to allow teams to practice for 6 weeks, because obviously the NCAA wants every team to be able to get enough time in before they put them on the field, because obviously you need to be able to like train, work with your players before you play games, or else it's just like, what? And, I think the NCAA, obviously for the most part, they've given the conferences the power to decide what they're going to do, and then they'll just make some overarching rulings. So, you mentioned earlier about Alabama having 5 players. Don't forget, Auburn had 3 players who were asymptomatic that had COVID-19. So, obviously, when you're bringing all these kids back to school, you don't know who's been where, what they've been doing. So you got to test them. You got to make sure, okay, they have it. We got to isolate them away, and we'll just have to wait till a certain period of time before we bring them back out to the field to practice with the players. We got to make sure the players that we have currently are going to get it, and et cetera. So I'm sure in that realm is going to be by school. But obviously, I'm sure if the SEC says, okay, everybody, we're doing this, they're going to do it, because, if one team can't do it, it's just going to make things messy, because you can't just say one team can't play. Because they're like, what are you going to do? You can't change the schedule. So, I think for the most part, everybody just has to be really careful. Colleges have to be careful. Obviously, right now, there's no kids on campus, and we don't know if there's going to be kids on campuses when the fall comes back around. So obviously, you mentioned also as well, they might have stadiums with people. But obviously, I don't know if they're thinking fully capacity or just maybe half, maybe a quarter. We don't know. But obviously, when people come back to campus, that's going to be another challenge in and of itself, just to make sure, okay, now they're going to classes. Now, if they have in-class classes, now they're around people. They're going to see their friends they haven't seen all summer for the last 5 months. And then you're worried, what if they got it and they give it to them? And then, it's very, the difference, like you said, from NFL to college is college, I feel like, is more complex. There's more, these are college kids. They're at a college campus. It's just different. There's more you have to worry about, where I feel like NFL, these are grown men. They're either at their house or they're working out. And then if they do anything else outside of that, that's on them. Where college, like, they have to be there because that's where they play. Like, they can't just not be there unless they just say, I quit. So definitely have to see how the NCAA monitors the situation moving forward, so nothing bad or something that could potentially happen because of it.
And that's why I think it's taken so long. We don't know all the given details. Of course, there's been updates that are more encouraging, but we still don't know exactly how the main product will go, because it may run smoothly for a week, and then there's a big outburst of people. Like, if one team shows up, right, and they have 5 players tested positive before a game for COVID-19, do they still get to play, or do they have to sit it out? And if, let's say, the quarterback room is all with COVID-19, do they have to forfeit the game? Like, how does this work? Like, we don't know. When do we sacrifice people having COVID-19 to playing games? And when do we say that because of this, a game has to be postponed or even outright awarded a free W to somebody else? And I'm sure that's going to be a humongous issue for the scheduling committee, or not scheduling committee, but the playoff committee, and seeing all this, let alone the fact that we don't know if they're going to play a full schedule 100%. We think that that's the goal, since they're still trying to make things work to stay on the clock on time. But we don't know anything for sure. Everything's still kind of middling in the air, and we know everybody's kind of running on different clocks right now. But at the same time, eventually things are going to give, you would think. You can't play the sport of football and not expect some sort of up-close physicality. So it's very possible that, it's going to spread around no matter what happens. And it's about minimizing the spread, of course, isolating members that may show symptoms or are asymptomatic and keeping them away. But at what point does that cost people games and how people will feel about that? But we're going to take our last break and we're going to come back and we're going to be doing a little bit of the hot take seat.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Okay, GSMC, last segment, so it's going to be a little bit wonky. How me and Brice can get down, so we're going to be doing, a little, standard sports talk, sports podcasting. Some takes, we got to give them out, and, in our typical fashion, we kind of have to go a little bit outlandish and have a little fun with them, but, maybe they fall in the realm of reality. Okay, Brice, you said you had a prediction. Is it bold? How bold is it?
I think a lot of people think it's bold. Would think it's bold.
So is it like Times New Roman bold?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. It's not Arial, so it's Times New Roman bold. Go ahead, give us the take. What is it?
Well, my take is that the Cleveland Browns will make it to the AFC Championship game this year.
Explain, please, for all of us listening right now.
Listen. On paper, from a roster perspective, I feel like they have one of the best front sevens. They have obviously one of the best skill position groups, right, in the NFL. So I'm thinking if everything clicks for Baker, the running game is going, they get Odell going, Baker is efficient in not turning the ball over, and the defense can play like they can play with the talent they possess on that defense. They could realistically give a Baltimore or a Kansas City a run for their money. And not to mention they're already in the division with Baltimore, so they're going to play them twice. So I think that, obviously, again, this is a bold prediction. If things fall in place for Cleveland, from that perspective, you can logically say that they could be potentially the third best team in the AFC, and all they got to do is upset either Kansas City or Baltimore, and now they're going to be in the final two when it's all said and done. I know it sounds crazy because, remember, basically since we've been alive, the Browns have been irrelevant. And so that we've never really seen success from Cleveland. But this may be the closest thing they got to a LeBron year they had back in 2016. and they make a run and they do things that shock the world and people are going to be surprised and Cleveland will be put on the map, at least from the football perspective. And so, bold prediction, Cleveland makes it to the AFC Championship game and shocks the world.
So, in order for Cleveland to do this, we have to remember we have to believe Baker Mayfield can do this. You believe Baker Mayfield can do this?
Mm-hmm. I think Baker's going to have a very efficient year this year. I think he'll be close to about 30 touchdowns.
Enough 30 touchdowns, efficient.
And around 10 picks. So I'm thinking 30 and 10.
That's a very, very good quarterback year for most guys. Like people who are the elite throw for 40 touchdowns. So 30 is like, wow, you had yourself a season. Like Dak Prescott had himself a season for Dak standards last year, and he had 33 touchdowns or something. Mm-hmm. So you're swinging for the fences here. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta swing for the fences, man.
I respect it. I'm not gonna try and tackle your point. People know how I feel about the Cleveland Browns and about what happened the past 2 years there. So
You want to start doing some skip and chant and put some dew on it?
Nah. But I do have my own ideology here. It's crazy. We're in the same division. I think that the Cincinnati Bengals will win at least 7 games in this upcoming season. But only 2 of those games are going to be won in the division. But they are going to win outside of their division and have 7 games total. So they'll probably go 7-9, at least. Here's why. They have a rookie quarterback in Joe Burrow. We all know he's very talented and he could do some things with some development and some, fine tuning by coaches. But what we haven't talked about enough is just how good Joe Mixon really is. Joe Mixon gets overlooked a lot in the rookie or in the running back conversation just because he's over there suffering, or should I say suffered over there in Cincinnati. Same thing with A.J. Green for a little while before he was recognized as being one of the premier wide receiver talents. People still see him as one of the better ones out there. Cincinnati has been a train wreck and has been rebuilding, and now the rebuild is over. In my opinion, it's time to build camaraderie. It's time to build chemistry. It's time to start implementing an actual system, a game plan, an identity. And I think within that identity, it's going to be very clear. We are going to run Joe Mixon and get Joe Burrow acquainted with NFL-level quarterbacking as much as possible. How do they do this? You follow the Cowboys' ideology. Granted, you don't have the offensive line of the Cowboys, but they did draft a really, really good offensive lineman 2 years ago who did not see the field last year. So hopefully they'll have him back. Of course, they'll have Tyler Eifert back as well in the tight end spot to catch the football. Tyler Boyd will be there. They already got the boy from Clemson in the second round at the wide receiver. They have retooled in aspects that you could not imagine. And now, before we say that defensively they're a mess, sure, last year they were a mess defensively. But let's not forget that at a certain point, teams do throw in the towel. We saw Miami throw in the towel 5 weeks into the season, but then they turned it around because they felt like they had enough to get what they needed to do. Especially when Tua went down, if that was the guy that they looked at this whole time, there's just no way that they weren't going to, try and, make a semblance of a season and give people some hope. Because you can't just lose outright. You can't beat Detroit and lose outright because Detroit hasn't been right since that year when they went 0-16. No matter the Calvin era or anything like that, it just never has felt the same. You can't lose that much. You have to win something. So I do think that Cincinnati is better than what we may think it is, and I think they're going to shock some people. But I'm telling people, and I'm telling you, Brice, do not be shocked if Cincinnati comes out there and starts winning some games.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I definitely expect them to be competitive this year. So that might call for them stealing some games. So that's definitely possible. Because, NFL, anything can happen. If they get a rhythm going, got something going for them, maybe play better in a couple of parts of the team than expected, why not?
Okay. Do you have one more quick one that you just want to get off your chest?
I mean, honestly, that Cleveland was all I really got, if I'm being honest. I really wasn't thinking about a second one.
Okay. I think I have one more in me. Are you prepared for this?
Mm-hmm.
When people look at the tight end position, it needs to change. We need to define what we see as a quality tight end, because there are elite level tight ends that can do two phases of the game. They can block and they can catch. But most tight ends nowadays, to get on the field, you have to be able to catch. So I feel like at this point, you need multiple tight ends in your schemes, and you need one of them to be elite at one thing and another to be okay at two. Here's why. Okay, real quickly. Look at the Saints. The Saints have Jared Cook. He's not the best pass blocker. They had Jimmy Graham. He wasn't the best pass blocker. Actually, Jimmy Graham was never a pass blocker. In fact, when you knew Jimmy Graham was in the game, it was a pass play. But their backups behind them were good enough pass blockers, run blockers, should I say, and they could catch out the back or catch in, in routes, can run a short route, run a short out, run a in, a 10 route curl or a 10-yard curl. They could do things that kept the defensive honest. But when you have somebody like Gronk or like George Kittle who are at a different level, that's when you're in gravy. So, and that's hard to find. You don't find those typically in your top picks. You find the pass catchers, because that's what people care about. So if you want to find someone like George Kittle, you gotta dig a diamond in the rough. All right. Well, with that being said, this is the GSMC Football Podcast, and that's going to be the end for today. Thank you all for tuning in with us, listening. Don't forget to rate and review us on any platform you choose. 5 stars, 5 stars. And Brice, any last words?
All right. Just please stay safe out there, guys. Football will be back here soon, and it will be a little weird, but hey, as long as we have it in this time in the world and everything that's going on, it'll definitely be a relief to see it on our TV screens come fall.
Well said. All right. For Brice, this is Ethan with GSMC. We'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.